I stood at the altar of the Gold Coast Room in Chicago's historic Drake Hotel, my hands trembling inside Tiago's steady grip. The room was a masterpiece of Gilded Age opulence. Crystal chandeliers dripping light onto hand-painted murals, velvet drapes framing a view of Lake Michigan that looked like gray steel under the November sky. Everything was perfect. The ivory silk of my gown, the soft murmur of 200 guests, the scent of white gardenias. Except for the front row. 3 gold chivalry chairs sat empty, reserved for the bride's family. I stared at them. They looked like gaps in a smile. No text, no call. Just silence where my parents and brother should have been. The photographer, a kind woman named Sarah, tried to catch my eye. Her camera lowered slightly as if she didn't want to document the humiliation. I forced my lips into a smile that felt like cracked glass. Tiago squeezed my hand tighter, an anchor in the rising tide of my shame. In that moment, staring at those 3 empty chairs, something inside me didn't break. It evaporated. The hope I had been carrying around like a heavy stone for 29 years simply vanished. I realized, with a clarity that was colder than the lake wind outside, that I didn't matter to them. I never had. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. Later I found out where they were. They weren't in a hospital. Their car hadn't broken down. My parents, Jeffrey and Michelle, were at a gala across town. A 30 Under 30 awards dinner for my brother Levi. Levi, who had bought his way onto the list with a donation my father made to the organizing committee. They were there to protect the brand. To smile for cameras that actually mattered to them. I shouldn't have been surprised. My life had been built on the architecture of their neglect. I was the fixer, the staff, the one who managed their rental properties for free because family helps family. The one who designed the extension on their Lake Forest estate pro bono because it's good for your portfolio. Levi was the asset. The golden boy who played hedge fund manager with their money while I balanced the books he ignored. I stayed because I thought love was a transaction I just hadn't paid enough for yet. I thought if I worked harder, fixed more, gave more, eventually the ledger would balance and I would earn my place at the table. It's a trap, you know. The normalization of cruelty. When you grow up in an ecosystem where affection is scarce and criticism is abundant, you learn to metabolize abuse like oxygen. You don't notice it's poisoning you until you step outside and take a breath of clean air. You think the suffocation is just how breathing feels. I believed that if I could just be perfect enough, useful enough, they would see me. But standing in that ballroom, surrounded by Tiago's family who looked at me with genuine warmth, I finally understood. You cannot earn what people are unwilling to give. You cannot fix people who are committed to being broken. 5 years passed. 5 years of silence. I stopped calling. I stopped fixing. I built my own firm, focusing on sustainable architecture, designing spaces that healed rather than hid. And then last week I sold it. $42 million. A quiet, private sale to a European conglomerate that valued my patents on green concrete. I sat in my office, staring at the wire transfer confirmation on my screen. 42 million. It was a number that should have made me scream or dance or call everyone I knew. Instead I felt a strange, hollow ache. Check my phone. Nothing. No congratulations from the people who shared my DNA. Just a notification from Instagram. Levi posting from a yacht in Ibiza. He looked tan and expensive, holding a bottle of champagne that cost more than my first car. The caption read, "Living the legacy." I knew, because I still had access to the family accounts I used to manage, that the yacht was rented on a credit card my parents had just taken a second mortgage to pay off. They were drowning to keep him afloat, and he was drinking vintage bubbles while the ship went down. I realized then that I was still waiting. Still hoping that my success would be loud enough to wake them up. Still wanting them to be proud. It was pathetic. And I was done being pathetic. Closed my laptop. Picked up my keys. I drove to the Aston Martin dealership on Rush Street. I didn't even test drive it. I pointed to the Vantage in the showroom window. A sleek, predatory thing in metallic green that looked like money and vengeance. $185,000. I wrote a check. I drove it home, the engine purring like a captive tiger. I parked it in front of my townhouse, took one photo and posted it to Instagram. No filter. Just the car and the caption. Dreams realized. The bait was set. Took less than an hour. My phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in years. Michelle. My mother. Not a text. All. I let it ring twice, staring at the screen, feeling my heart hammer against my ribs. Then I answered. We need to talk, she said. No hello. No how are you. No congratulations. Just the command. Family emergency. Tomorrow at the house. 2 p.m. I didn't ask what was wrong. I didn't ask why, after 5 years of radio silence, she suddenly had my number. I just said, I'll be there. The next day, I drove the Vantage to Lake Forest. The drive was familiar, a route paved with memories of my own inadequacy. The iron gates of the estate were rusting. The landscaping, once manicured to within an inch of its life, looked overgrown. The house itself, a sprawling Tudor mansion that used to intimidate me, just looked tired. It smelled of old money and decay. I parked my metallic green car next to my father's aging Mercedes. The contrast was sharp enough to cut. My car was paid for. Theirs was a lease they were probably behind on. I stepped out, smoothing my blazer, and walked to the front door. I didn't knock. I walked in. They were waiting for me in the dining room. Jeffrey, Michelle, and Levi. Seated at the long mahogany table like a tribunal. Levi looked disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, the golden boy veneer cracking under the weight of whatever reality he was currently trying to outrun. My parents looked older. Smaller. They didn't stand up. They didn't hug me. Sit down, Jeffrey said. I remained standing. I'm comfortable. Jeffrey slid a thick dossier across the polished wood. Stopped inches from my hand. We don't have time for games, Isla. We are in a crisis. I looked at the folder, then at them. What kind of crisis? Levi, Michelle said, her voice trembling with a practiced fragility. He's in trouble. A misunderstanding at the fund. Federal charges. Embezzlement, Levi muttered, looking at the table. They're calling it embezzlement. Was a loan. I was going to pay it back. He needs $4 million, Jeffrey said, his voice hard and flat. Immediately. To settle out of court. To make this go away before the indictments are unsealed. I stared at them. $4 million. They hadn't called to see me. They hadn't called to apologize for the empty chairs at my wedding. They had called because they smelled cash. And you want me to give it to him? I asked, my voice calm, betraying nothing of the storm inside. It's your duty, Jeffrey said. To protect the family name. To protect your brother. We know about the sale, Isla. We know you have it. Family helps family, Michelle added, a tear slipping down her cheek right on cue. We've supported you your whole life. Now it's your turn to step up. I looked at Levi. He smirked, a tiny reflex twitch of his lips. He assumed I would cave. I always caved. I was Isla the fixer. Isla the doormat. Where were you? I asked quietly. The room went silent. What? Jeffrey frowned. At my wedding, I said. Where were you? 5 years ago. The Drake Hotel. Front row. 3 empty chairs. Where were you? Jeffrey waved a hand dismissively. That was a party, Isla. This is life or death. This is prison. Stop being petty. Petty, I repeated. You missed the most important day of my life to go to a gala for him. I pointed at Levi. And now you want me to pay $4 million to keep him out of the consequences of his own greed. We did what we had to do for the family brand. Michelle snapped, the tears vanishing instantly. And you will do what you have to do now. You have $42 million. Do you think you earned that alone? We made you. I looked at them. Really looked at them. And for the first time I didn't see parents. I saw strangers. Strangers who felt entitled to my blood, my sweat, and my bank account. You're right, I said. Survival is important. I reached into my bag. They leaned in, the collective tension in the room tightening like a bowstring. They expected a checkbook. They expected salvation. Instead, I pulled out a thick, leather-bound legal document. I placed it on the table next to the dossier of Levi's crimes. I anticipated you might need money, I said softly. I know how expensive Levi's lifestyle is. So I made a decision. I opened the binder. This is the charter for the Eleanor Legacy Foundation. What? Levi asked, his brow furrowing. I have irrevocably endowed $32 million, the bulk of my liquid assets from the sale, to affordable housing projects in South Chicago. It's gone. It's locked in a trust. Can't touch it. You can't touch it. Not even a judge can touch it. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of oxygen leaving a room. You gave our money to strangers. Michelle whispered, her face draining of color. It wasn't your money, I said. And they aren't strangers. They are people who actually need a home. Unlike you. Levi stood up so fast his chair clattered backward. You bitch. You did this on purpose. Sit down, Levi, I said, my voice cracking like a whip. He froze. And there's one more thing, I said. You might be wondering why I named it the Eleanor Foundation. I turned the page in the binder to reveal a set of nursing home records. Grandma Eleanor, I said. The only person in this family who ever loved me. The only one who remembered my birthday. You told me she died peacefully in her sleep at the estate. You told me you were with her. I slid the records toward them. But these records show you moved her into a state-run facility 3 years before she died. A budget facility. One with violations for neglect. You moved her there to save money. Money you used to pay for Levi's legal fees the first time he got caught trading on insider information. Michelle gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Jeffrey looked away, unable to meet my eyes. She died alone, I said, my voice trembling with a rage so cold it burned. In a room with peeling paint and strangers screaming down the hall. You let her die alone to save him. I looked at Levi. This money restores the honor you stained. It builds homes for people who will cherish them, in the name of the woman you discarded. We'll sue you, Jeffrey snarled, finding his voice. We'll sue you for every dime. We'll prove you're mentally incompetent. I laughed. It was a free sound. A sound that had been trapped in my throat for decades. With what money, Dad? Yes. You're broke. You have a second mortgage on this house. Levi is about to be indicted. You can't even afford the retainer for a lawyer to sue me. I looked around the dining room one last time. At the peeling wallpaper in the corner they thought I wouldn't notice. At the dust on the chandelier. You have no power here, I said. You never did. You just had money. And now you don't even have that. I turned and walked out. I didn't look back. I got into my Aston Martin and drove away, leaving them in the mausoleum they had built for themselves. 6 months later, I stood on a construction site in South Chicago. The air smelled of sawdust and wet concrete, the smell of progress. Zuri, a 19-year-old architecture student and the first recipient of the Eleanor Grant, stood beside me in a hard hat that was slightly too big for her. We were looking at the blueprints for the new community center. Why did you do it? Zuri asked, tracing the lines of the atrium on the paper. $32 million. You could have bought an island. You could have disappeared. I looked at the steel beams rising against the skyline. I thought about Levi, currently serving a 7-year sentence in a minimum security prison in Wisconsin. I thought about the foreclosure sign on the gate of the Lake Forest estate. I thought about my parents, living in a 2-bedroom rental in Schaumburg, their social circle evaporated, their calls unanswered by the people they used to impress. I did disappear, I told Zuri. I disappeared from a life that was trying to erase me. I looked at her, young, brilliant, and full of a potential that just needed a little bit of soil to grow. True justice isn't burning your enemy's house down, I said. It's building a new house that they can't enter. It's planting seeds in ground that will actually yield a harvest. The best revenge isn't destruction, Zuri. It's creation. She smiled, and we went back to work, building a legacy that would outlast the silence of 3 empty chairs. If you believe that the best revenge is building a life they can't touch, share this story. Let's remind the world that we define our own worth.